This is a story of a mother's unbearable choice, a heart-wrenching decision that would haunt her forever. Umar, a stunning 19-year-old orphan, lived with her uncle, Chief Okonkwo, who had taken her in after her parents' tragic passing when she was just 7. Chief Okonkwo was the wealthiest farmer in Umu-Oma, and he was loved and respected by all the villagers. However, he was a very strict man. Despite his strict demeanor, Chief Okonkwo showered Oma with love and care, treating her like one of his own children. He had 2 sons. Oma attended the same missionary primary and secondary school as her cousins, where she excelled academically. As Oma celebrated completing her final secondary school exams, a life-altering event shook her world, forever changing the course of her destiny. A young tourist from the city, in company of other tourists, visited their village Umu-Oma in search of adventure. His name was Michael. Oma was on her way to the stream, holding a small water pot and humming softly on that fateful evening when she bumped into Michael taking a walk alone. He smiled lovingly at her and asked if he could walk with her to the stream. Oma agreed without a second thought. As they walked, Michael told her so many stories about the big cities and how much he enjoyed being in Umu-Oma. His smile was as warm as the sun that shone over their village, and Uma found herself falling for him. After that day, they began to meet at the stream almost every day, and Misho began to develop feelings for her. He spoke of love and whispered sweet words that made her heart race. Oma fell for his charm, his promises, and the dreams he painted of a life far away from the dust and poverty of her world. 3 days before Michael and other tourists left Umu-Oma, they met again as usual, but this time it was in the small hut where Michel was staying. That evening they chatted happily. One thing led to the other. They both got carried away and made out. It was Uma's first time. Although she felt a little pain, she wished that moment never ended. She felt so safe and secure in his arms. Michel left 3 days later, but promised to return to the village to see her. 3 weeks after that fateful encounter, Oma started experiencing persistent nausea, followed by bouts of vomiting. Her uncle's wife, Adama, noticed Oma's unusual behavior and grew concerned. After close observation, Adama's suspicions were confirmed. Oma was pregnant. She reported to her husband, and he summoned Oma immediately. "You are a disgrace. How can you get pregnant under my roof after everything I've done for you? This is how you choose to pay me?" Okonkwo roared, his fury uncontainable. He asked Oma who was responsible for her pregnancy, but Oma refused to utter a word. She simply kept crying. This further angered her uncle. She begged for mercy, for a second chance, but deep down she knew there was none. Her uncle was a very strict man, and even his children feared him. "Pack your things and get out of my house, since you do not know who got you pregnant," Okonkwo roared, his face dark with anger. Oma gasped, her eyes widening in horror. "Uncle, please, I have nowhere to go," she cried. "Then sleep in the streets. I will not house a shameless girl who doesn't know how to close her legs and now doesn't even know who got her pregnant. Go and live with the one who put you in this state," Okonkwo roared. With a fierce glint in his eye, he stormed into his hut, issuing a stern warning that echoed through the compound. "I better not lay eyes on you when I emerge." Uma turned to Adama, who was almost in tears. She felt sorry for Uma, but they both knew that there was nothing she could do to make her husband change his mind. So, Oma packed her clothes and dragged herself out of the compound with her small bag clutched to her chest. The village was silent, save for the chirping of crickets and the distant hooting of an owl. She walked aimlessly, tears blurring her vision, each step filled with uncertainty. She thought of her mother, how she would have held her close, wiped away her tears, and whispered that everything would be all right. But there was no one to do that now. She was alone. As she wandered through the darkened paths, a single question burned in her mind. Where would she go? She had no destination, no plan, only the urgency to keep moving forward. She pressed on through the darkness and spent the night in the open air when she was tired of walking. First thing in the morning, she continued on her journey. By noon, she finally reached Anioma, a neighboring village. Anioma was a very small village, and it was easy for the villagers to notice the presence of a stranger. However, since Oma could communicate in their local dialect, they let her stay. In Anioma village, Oma found refuge in an abandoned hut at the edge of the village. She found some abandoned household items in the hut, which she cleaned up and began to use. It was a very small hut, but at least it had a roof over her head. She survived by begging for food in the marketplace. Sometimes, kind strangers gave her food and money. Other times, she worked on people's farms, earning meager wage for the hard labor. She also ran little errands for the wealthy villagers, just to get money to feed herself. Begging and doing menial jobs here and there was her routine for many months as her pregnancy progressed. Then, one fateful evening, she had just finished eating and was taking a walk when she felt the first pain of labor. She gasped, holding her stomach, her vision blurring as she fell to the ground. People gathered around, whispering and pointing. When the women realized that she was in labor, they rushed her to the village midwife. Inside the midwife's small maternity hut, Uma's labor progressed well, and after 3 hours, she was delivered of a beautiful baby girl. The old midwife, known as Mama Nkechi, cleaned the newborn with a clean towel and examined her body for any sign of abnormality but found none. Then she placed the baby in her mother's arms after wrapping her up in a clean wrapper. Oma stared down at the little face of her daughter. But instead of the joy she had heard other mothers speak of after birth, Oma felt only fear, only a deep, suffocating weight pressing against her chest. She could barely hold herself together as tears streamed down her face. "How am I supposed to care for you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "I have nothing. I cannot even feed myself most days. How will I feed you?" The midwife sighed. "You are stronger than you think. You have survived so much already. You will find a way." 2 days later, the midwife deemed Oma and her child healthy enough for discharge. As Oma prepared to leave, the midwife packed her a bundle of food and gently used baby clothes previously belonging to her own granddaughter. "Take this, my dear," she said with a warm smile. "It should help you get by until you're strong enough to work again." She then turned to her 12-year-old grandson. "Help Oma carry these items back to her hut." Oma wrapped her baby in the cloth the midwife had given her. She stepped out of the maternity hut, closely followed by the midwife's grandson. They walked past the village square, Oma keeping her head down to avoid the curious stares of those who had once pitied her. When she reached the hut, she collected the gifts from the boy and thanked him. Then she sank onto the mat she had called a bed for months. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a tiny whimper. Oma rocked her gently, tears slipping down her face as she thought about the cruel reality ahead. "How will I feed you?" she whispered. "How will I protect you?" She had begged for food before and worked on people's farms for a token, but with a child strapped to her back, who would hire her? Who would take pity on her now, she wondered. She thought of going back to her uncle to beg him, but she knew that would be an effort in futility. He would not keep her in his house with her baby. It was considered a disgrace in Umuoma for a girl to give birth and remain in her family house. For hours she sat there, staring at the tiny face of the baby. The hopelessness grew inside her until a thought crossed her mind. Leaving the baby somewhere she might be found, somewhere safe. She decided to take the baby to the very big river located inside the forest. Only travelers used the route. Oma herself had used the same route on her way to Anioma when her uncle sent her away. "I will leave my baby there and return to my uncle in Umuoma. I am too young for this load," she said to herself, hoping that a wealthy traveler will find her child, take her in and give her the life she couldn't afford. Very early 5 days later, when she was strong enough to embark on a journey, Oma woke up, cleaned her baby up and breastfed her. She also ate the little food she had in the house. With the baby securely tied to her back, she gathered her meagre belongings, a handful of worn clothes and a small basket. Then, with a deep breath, she set off into the dense forest, her footsteps leading her towards the serene waters of the river. Each step she took felt heavier than the last as she walked into the forest. When she reached the river, she hesitated, then knelt on the damp earth, wrapped her baby in a wrapper, then placed her in the basket with some of the baby clothes gifts from the midwife. She stared at the baby for a while and then burst into tears. "My little baby, my sweet, innocent child, please forgive me." She paused, biting her lip as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I have nothing to give you, my love. No warm bed, no food to fill your tiny belly. You deserve a life better than the one I can offer. Maybe someone kind will find you. Maybe they will love you the way I wish I could, without the cruel hands of poverty tearing them apart. Please, please understand. If I take you with me, I will only be leading you to suffering, and I cannot bear to watch you wither away in my arms." She pulled a small, carefully wrapped bundle from her dress. She untied it, revealing a single, beautiful bead, the only treasure she possessed. "This belonged to my mother, and it was the only gift she gave me before she died. I have nothing else to give you, my love, nothing but this. May it be a sign that you were not abandoned, but given away with a heart full of love. I name you Kiwendu, because only God knows what will become of our lives." She carefully placed the bead on the baby's neck. With one last choked sob, she got up, turned and ran as fast as she could, her feet pounding against the forest floor. The cries of her baby faded into the wind, and with each step she took, her soul felt like it was being torn apart. The baby's cries shattered the quiet morning, her tiny body trembling as she kicked and flailed on the basket. Her wails echoed across the water, carried by the wind. Suddenly, the river stirred. Gentle ripples spread across the surface, distorting the soft reflection of the rising sun. Slowly, a pair of glowing yellow eyes emerged just above the water, unblinking and focused. A massive crocodile slid forward, its dark, scaled body moving wildly. Drawn by the helpless cries of the baby, it cut through the water, swimming towards the riverbank where the baby was. The baby's sobs grew louder, her tiny fists clenching in distress. The crocodile hesitated for a moment, its powerful tail sweeping behind it, then continued, moving closer to the baby. Then, just as the crocodile lunged at the baby, a loud voice rang out, "Stop there!" The crocodile stopped in its tracks. From the shadows of the dense forest, a woman emerged, holding a staff. She was middle-aged, her long greying hair cascading over her shoulders. She lifted her hand and began to speak to the animal in a firm but calm voice. The words were ancient, commanding, and filled with something beyond human understanding. The crocodile let out a deep, guttural growl, its yellow eyes flickering with something almost like recognition. Then, slowly, it backed away. With one final glance at the baby, it turned and slipped silently into the river, vanishing beneath the rippling surface as if it had never been there. The woman knelt beside the child, gently lifting her into her arms. She rocked the baby, whispering softly, her voice soothing like a lullaby. "Our ancestors led me to you, little one," she murmured. "You were never meant to be lost. Now, I will become your mother." The baby stopped crying, curling into the warmth of the stranger's embrace. The woman cast one last glance at the still water before turning toward the forest. Without hesitation, she stepped into the trees, carrying the child away as the wind whispered through the leaves. The river remained silent, undisturbed, but the baby's fate had just been rewritten. As for Roma, she continued to walk aimlessly, her feet dragging across the damp earth. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her heart was heavier than her weary body. "What have I done? What kind of mother am I?" she whispered between sobs. Her body shook as she clutched her small bag around herself. Every step she took away from the river felt like she was tearing herself apart. "I had no choice," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "She deserves better. She deserves to live." Yet her words brought her no comfort. The image of her baby, crying alone on the riverbank, burned into her mind. Was she still lying there? Had someone found her? The thought of never knowing was almost unbearable, but what choice did she have? If she had kept her child, they both would have perished in hunger and suffering. She wiped her face with trembling hands and pressed forward. The sun had risen higher now, casting golden beams through the thick canopy. She kept walking, making her way home to Uma, to her uncle's house. She reached the familiar dirt path leading into the village. Her legs wobbled as she forced herself forward, her heart hammering in her chest. Then she entered the village, met by the stares of the villagers. As she got to her uncle's compound, she hesitated before stepping inside, her presence unnoticed at first. Then, a voice cut through the air. "Omar?" She turned, and there stood his cousin Chudi, Okonkwo's first son. His eyes widened in shock. "Chudi," she choked out, falling to her knees as fresh tears poured from her eyes. Chudi rushed to her, gripping her arms and pulling her up. Omar sobbed harder, her fingers digging into his arms. He led her into the hut and gave her water to drink. Her uncle and his wife, who had gone out, returned in the evening. Omar entered their hut and knelt before them. She apologized for getting pregnant and promised it would never happen again. "Where is your baby?" her uncle asked her. Omar burst into tears immediately. "Uncle, I lost the baby. She was stillborn." A sharp silence filled the air. Okonkwo's face twisted with grief. He got up and lifted Omar up from her kneeling position. He pulled her into his embrace, holding her as she wept against his chest. "I am also sorry," Chief Okonkwo apologized. "I think I overreacted. I felt very bad after you left, but I had no idea where to find you," he added. He welcomed Omar back into his home and got her some new set of clothes, as the ones she returned with were ragged and unattractive. She gradually began to settle in, but her life never remained the same. She completely lost her peace. She sat on the bamboo mat in the small hut her uncle had given her to stay in, staring at the thatched roof, days after she returned to Umuoma. It was a cool evening. The guilt of what she had done troubled her soul like a relentless beast. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her baby's face, helpless, alone, crying on the riverbank. "My child, please forgive me," she whispered as she continued to cry. A soft knock startled her. She wiped her tears quickly, forcing herself to breathe steadily. It was Adama, her uncle's wife. Omar cleared her throat, composing herself. "Come in, Auntie," she managed to say. The door creaked open, and Adama stepped inside, a concerned look on her face. She sat beside Omar, studying her. "You have been quiet since you returned. You barely eat, and I see your eyes, swollen from crying. Tell me, my child, what truly happened?" Omar swallowed hard, fighting back the sob rising in her throat. "I told you, Auntie, the baby was stillborn." Adama sighed, reaching for her hand. "I know grief when I see it, Omar. I carried 3 babies in my womb before I had my first child. I lost them all before birth, and I know the kind of sorrow that leaves behind. But you, there is something more." Omar forced a small, broken smile. "I will be fine, Auntie. I just need time." Adama studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right, my dear. Just know you are not alone. You have been given another chance, and Okonkwo has welcomed you back with open arms. Do not let grief swallow you whole." Omar nodded, but deep inside she knew it was not grief alone that was consuming her. It was guilt. After Adam left, Omar lay down, but sleep refused to come. She felt suffocated by her own thoughts. She stepped outside and quietly walked toward the village stream, the same stream where her love journey with Michael had begun. She found a quiet spot and sat down, staring at her reflection in the water. "I am a monster," she choked out. "I abandoned my own child." Tears dripped from her cheeks. She wished she could go back and undo everything, but it was too late. Her child was gone. She remained at the stream for a while before she returned home. Visiting the stream every day, whether or not she was there to fetch water, became Omar's routine. Somehow that was the only place that gave her comfort. The strange woman who picked up the baby was called Ujunwa. Ujunwa was from Uma village, the same village as Uma. She had been banished into the evil forest 10 years earlier. Ujunwa was a healer who had lived in Uma village her entire life. She was kind, generous, and known for her healing herbs. She healed all kinds of sicknesses with her miraculous herbs, and she was loved by many. But despite her kindness, fate had been cruel to her. She was barren. In a village where a woman's worth was measured by the number of children she bore, her childlessness made her a subject of scorn. The whispers followed her wherever she went. But she endured. One fateful harvest season, the village was plagued by a mysterious illness. It began with the children. One by one, they fell ill with high fevers, their bodies covered in strange rashes. Ujunwa did her best to treat the children with her herbs. Some recovered, but many did not. Parents wept as their children wasted away, their small frames unable to fight the sickness. The elders were baffled and fear gripped the Uma people. The king and the village chiefs sought guidance from the chief priest, a revered and feared man known as Ezemwo. He claimed to speak directly with the gods, and he had made consultations and proffered solutions to their problems in the past. When he was consulted, he made some incantations and carried out some rituals for 3 days. Then, he asked the king to summon the villagers to the palace before revealing the result of his consultation. The king did as he was told. After the villagers had gathered, the chief priest began to speak. "There is an unclean presence among us," he declared, his voice carrying over the wails of grieving mothers. "The gods are angry. A woman walks among us who has cursed this land with her barrenness. She has been rejected by the gods, and now she brings ruin upon our children." Murmurs spread through the crowd, eyes shifting, searching for a target. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, they all turned toward Ujunwa, the only childless woman in Uma at that time. She froze as a collective gasp filled the air. "No!" she protested, stepping backward. "I have done nothing wrong. I am innocent." But her words meant nothing. The chief priest had spoken, and to defy him was to defy the gods themselves. The villagers surged forward, their faces twisted with rage and fear. "She must be cast out," someone shouted. "Banish her," another yelled. "There must be a mix-up somewhere," Ujunwa's husband protested, but no one paid attention. Chief Okonkwo, who had always treated Ujunwa kindly, was one of the few who hesitated. "Are we certain? We have no proof that Ujunwa..." The chief priest silenced him with a piercing glare. "The gods have spoken. She must be banished into the evil forest before she destroys us all." The king was not happy about the outcome of the chief priest's consultation. Ujunwa was a woman dear to the heart of the royal family, but he had no reason to doubt the chief priest. He was the eye of the gods. He ordered that Ujunwa be banished into the evil forest. Despite the little civilization that was beginning to take place in the village due to the presence of some missionaries who built a primary and secondary school, the Uma people still upheld some of their traditions, one of which was to banish anyone found guilty of treason into the evil forest, knowing that nobody had ever survived the forest. And so Ujunwa was dragged through the village, her cries for mercy ignored. The people she had healed, the women she had comforted, turned their backs on her. They took her to the edge of the forest and commanded her to run inside. She was with nothing but the clothes on her. She ran into the forest, away from the echoes of their curses ringing in her ears. Ujunwa wandered the forest for days until she came across a hut. She wondered how a hut could have been built in the evil forest. She moved closer and called out, but no one answered. The hut was empty. She entered and found some household items and a basket of clothes. Although she was afraid, she decided to live there, hoping that the owner would show up someday. The owner never showed up, so that became her home. She survived on the knowledge of herbs she had, and she fed on fruits and some bush animals. Nothing evil happened to her, and she was never attacked by wild animals. She had lived in the forest for 10 years, until that fateful morning when she was led to walk far away, until she heard and followed the sound to the riverbank, where she picked up Oma's baby. She walked all the way back to her hut and began to raise the baby like her own. Ujunwa found some herbs, expertly weaving them into a natural remedy to stimulate her milk production. Gently massaging her breasts, she coaxed forth a nourishing flow with which she lovingly breastfed the baby. To sustain her own strength, Ujunwa feasted on lots of juicy fruits and water to ensure she continued to nurture the baby. "You are a gift. You came to me when I had no one," Ujunwa whispered as she fed the baby that morning. Knowing she could not call the baby just child forever, she named her Ifunanya, meaning love. Ifunanya wriggled in her arms, letting out a tiny laugh. For the first time in years, Ujunwa felt a sense of purpose. She spent her days gathering herbs, grinding medicinal roots, and tending to the child's needs. When the sun began to set, she would carry Ifunanya on her back and walk around her hut, singing soft lullabies. As the months passed, Ifunanya grew stronger, her small limbs filling out. She followed Ujunwa everywhere, crawling at first, then stumbling as she learned to walk. Ujunwa taught her how to listen to the whispers of the wind, to recognize the different leaves and their healing properties. "Always remember Ifunanya," Ujunwa would say as she guided little Ifunanya's small hands over different plants. "The earth speaks if you are willing to listen." Ifunanya was growing into a cheerful and ever-smiling, vibrant girl. The forest was her home, and Ujunwa was her mother in every sense of the word. Back in Oma, Oma continued to visit the stream every day, to mourn the daughter she had left behind, and she kept her secret buried deep within her heart. The gentle ripples of the water seemed to whisper to her, reminding her of what she had done. Sometimes she spoke to the wind, her voice trembling as though the river could carry her sorrow away. Each day she performed her duties, laughed when necessary, and played the part of a woman healed from grief. But her soul remained restless, and the weight of what she had done never left her. The pain never dulled, nor did the ache in her chest. Her life in Uma had returned to normal. Her uncle treated her kindly, Adma fussed over her well-being, and yet she felt as though she was merely existing, not truly living. Then, one morning, about 2 years after she returned to Oma, everything changed. She was sitting by the stream, lost in thought as usual, when a voice called from behind her. "Uma!" Her breath caught. The voice was unmistakable yet impossible. She turned around sharply, her heart racing. Standing a few feet away was Michael, the man who had changed her life forever. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Michael smiled, his blue eyes warm. Oma gasped, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "Michael, is it really you?" He stepped closer, reaching out gently. "Yes, Oma. I promised I would come back for you." Oma covered her mouth, shaking with emotion. She had long buried any hope of ever seeing him again, the father of her child, the man she had loved so deeply. "I came back for you, Oma. I want to keep my promise. I want to marry you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had dreamed of this moment so many times, but now that it was here, it felt unreal. Michael had come back. Yet, deep in her heart, Oma knew that she was not the same woman he had left behind. She was a mother who had abandoned her child. Michael held her hands and looked straight into her eyes. "Ona, will you be my wife?" She pressed her trembling fingers to her lips, overwhelmed. "Michael, I—" "Say yes," he whispered. "Let me take care of you." She nodded, unable to find the words. A sob escaped her lips as he pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly as if he would never let go again. By the next day, Michael went to see her uncle. Okonkwo welcomed him warmly, touched by his sincerity. When Michael expressed his desire to marry Omar, Okonkwo gave his blessing without hesitation. Adama wept, embracing Omar with joy. Preparations for the traditional marriage were made quickly. Michael returned to the city to finalize some arrangements, but he promised he would return for her. True to his word, he came back 2 months later with his parents and few friends. They had their traditional marriage, surrounded by friends and family. The night before Omar was to leave for the city with her husband, she stood by the stream one last time, gazing at her reflection. "I am leaving, but my heart will never be free," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Omar left Omar behind, but not the ghost of her past. She kept the secret of her daughter buried deep within her soul. Although she thought of telling her husband, she was scared of what the outcome would be, so she kicked against it. Life in Lagos should have felt like a new beginning for Omar. The bustling city lights, the well-furnished apartment Michael provided, and the comfort of knowing she was loved should have filled the void in her heart. But nothing seemed to touch the emptiness that had settled in her soul. Michael was a good man, attentive, supportive, and kind. He made sure she lacked nothing. They went on outings, visited parks, ate at expensive restaurants. From the outside, theirs was a beautiful love story. But for Omar, it was like living inside a glass house. Everything looked perfect, yet one emotional crack threatened to shatter it all. The memory of her baby girl haunted her, silently threading itself through every moment of her new life. When Michael noticed it, he brought it up one evening after dinner. "Omar, why don't you go back to school? You've always wanted to study. Maybe that will help you loosen up." She stared at him with wide eyes, unsure how to respond. She obtained a form and began university. Each morning she left home dressed in modest clothes, blending into a sea of youthful students. She took the bus, attended lectures, read until late into the night. She studied sociology. At school, her brilliance began to shine. Her lecturers praised her essays. She found new confidence in discussions, and some of her course-mates even looked up to her like a big sister. Michael was so proud of her. Years passed. She was in her 4th and final year when she discovered she was pregnant again. Michael was overjoyed. 9 months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Chibuikem, meaning, "God is my strength." Michael beamed with pride, and even Omar, for a fleeting moment, felt joy ripple through her. Omar sang to him, held him, rocked him to sleep, but the shadow remained. Every time she held Chiwikem, she imagined Chiwindu's face, the baby girl she left crying by the riverbank. Every time Chiwikem smiled, it reminded her of the smile she never saw her daughter give. She still refused to tell Michael the truth, even though she knew he deserved to know. At night, she would sneak out of bed and cry silently on the bathroom floor. She often looked at herself in the mirror, wondering if motherhood would ever feel complete. Her arms were full, but her heart was not. She longed to return to Uma, to stand by the river again, to speak to the wind and beg for forgiveness. One day, Michael touched her face gently as they lay in bed. "You're always far away, Oma. Even when you smile. Where do you go?" She forced a laugh. "Nowhere. Just tired." He believed her. But deep down, he knew something was missing, something she wasn't telling him. 8 years had passed since Ujunwa found Chiwendu, whom she named Ifunanya. Ifunanya had grown into a radiant girl, sharp-eyed, full of questions, and wise beyond her years. Her laughter filled the forest hut. Ujunwa had taught her everything she knew: divination, herbal healing, how to whisper to the forest and listen to the wind. Ifunanya absorbed it all like the earth drinks rain. To Ujunwa, she was no longer a child found in grief. She was a daughter born of destiny. Ujunwa had resigned to fate and settled for the forest, but one morning everything changed. She had risen early, as always, to gather herbs from the southern slope of the forest, As she bent over a bed of bitterleaf, she suddenly froze. A warm breeze swept past her, and then a voice deep echoed in her ears. "Go back to Umud, it is time." She gasped, falling backward onto the ground. The leaves trembled around her, her hands gripped her staff tightly as she looked around, but no one was there. That night, she knelt by the fire, watching Ifananya sleep. Could it be the gods calling her home? The same gods whose name had been used to banish her? Or had destiny circled back? By morning, her mind was made up. "Ifunanya," she said gently as she woke the girl. "Get dressed, my love. We're going on a journey." "To where?" Ifunanya asked, blinking. "Home," Ujinwa whispered. They packed a small bag with herbs and clothes and then set out. Ujinwa didn't know the way, but somehow they kept moving. The journey through the forest took them 2 days. At dawn on the 3rd day, the villagers saw 2 figures emerging from the shadows of the evil forest. Gasps rang out, women held their wrappers, children peeked from behind doorways. Few of the villagers recognized Ujinwa. Whispers swirled through Umuma like a rising storm. The return of Ujinwa from the dreaded forest was shocking enough, but the unfamiliar girl beside her ignited even deeper curiosity. People gathered in clusters, exchanging wild guesses, their eyes fixed on the woman once branded a curse. But Ujinwa didn't stop to answer questions. She walked with quiet authority straight to the palace, her staff tapping against the earth with every determined step. Ifunmyanya walked quietly beside her. When they reached the palace gate, the head of the guards who recognized her was shocked. No one had seen Ujinwa in 8 years, and none had expected her return. "I need to speak to the king," she said calmly. Moments later, word reached the king, and she was let in. Ujinwa stepped into the palace and bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady, "I have come to reveal the truth about what happened years ago, and about the sickness that once ravaged this land." The king sat upright. Ujinwa lifted her eyes. "I was never the cause, Your Majesty. I was only a victim of the lies of the chief priest." The king immediately sent for the chief priest, who by now was old and terribly sick, bedridden in his hut. With the help of his son, he was brought to the palace. When he saw Ujinwa standing before the king, he was shocked. "Chief priest," the king said sternly, "this woman claims you lied to us, that she was never responsible for the plague that afflicted our children. Speak now. Did you truly hear from the gods?" The old man coughed and looked down at his trembling hands, but refused to speak. "Speak now," the king thundered. The priest wept suddenly, and his voice wept. I lied. I lied to all of you," he confessed. "I was conducting a forbidden fertility ritual in the sacred grove, one meant to manipulate birth destinies and bring personal power to myself, not the community. It was never sanctioned by the gods. Ujinwa stumbled upon me. She saw everything. She threatened to expose me to the king." He paused, breathing heavily. "I was terrified. I knew if the truth came out, I would be disgraced and stripped of my title. So I inflicted the illness on the community, knowing that Ujinwa would be kept busy trying to heal the sick. I seized the moment to lie against her. I knew the village would believe me over her. I contaminated the village waters with cursed herbs to mimic a spiritual plague," the chief priest continued, his voice growing weaker. "I did it to silence her, to protect myself. I am so sorry." The king rose from his seat, fury and disbelief contorting his face. "You condemned innocent children. You destroyed this woman's life, and you dared to do it in the name of the gods." The chief priest simply continued to beg for mercy. The king's voice thundered. "You will find no mercy here. You are hereby banished into the evil forest to answer to the spirits whose names you defiled." But as the guards stepped forward to seize him, the chief priest held his chest. His body shook vigorously and he collapsed to the floor. His son, trying to lift him up, couldn't feel his pulse anymore. "He is gone," he cried out immediately. Ujinwa turned to the king, her voice quiet. The truth always finds its way even through the darkest shadows. The king apologized to her on behalf of the entire village, and she forgave them. Ujunwa's husband had remarried and had 2 children while she was away. Ujunwa decided to live alone, even though he was willing to take her back. The king built her a hut, furnished it neatly, and built an extra one, where she continued with her herbal medication. The villagers were happy to have her back, and Ujunwa in turn was grateful to have been back home. Ujunwa settled down quickly and enrolled Ifunyanya in the village missionary primary school. The villagers began to whisper about the strange girl she returned with. "Who is she?" they asked. "She's so beautiful, so well-mannered." Ifunyanya, now 8 years old, moved through the village with quiet grace. She greeted elders with respect. Her beauty turned heads, but it was her calm, almost mystical presence that left people in awe. Yet no one could say exactly who she was. Ujunwa, when asked, would simply say, "She is my daughter," nothing more. Ujunwa never had a child before, some would say. Where did she get her from? She brought her from the forest, others whispered. Maybe she's a spirit child. But through it all, Ujunwa remained silent. 3 months after their return, Oma's uncle, Chief Okonkwo, lost his wife, Adamma, and Oma travelled to the village for 1 week with her husband and son for the burial rites. They arrived in Umu Oma by dusk. The compound buzzed with mourners, relatives, and neighbours coming to pay respects. But even before the burial rites began, Oma felt the old pull in her chest. That evening, while others settled in, she slipped out quietly and walked the familiar path to the stream where she used to pour her guilt. She knelt by the edge and wept silently, her tears rippling into the water. She was still crying when she saw a young girl, graceful and poised, stepped into the stream, her calabash steady in her arms. Around her neck was a coral bead. The same coral bead Oma had worn, her baby years back, at the river where she abandoned her. Oma froze. Her lips parted. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The girl glanced at her briefly and smiled politely, then turned back to her task. Oma's hands began to tremble. She turned and walked away, barely feeling her steps, barely breathing. When she returned to her uncle's compound, she described the girl she had seen at the stream and asked who she was. She got to know that her name was Ifunyanya, whom Ujunwa returned with from the evil forest. "She says she is her daughter," the woman replied, "but you know Ujunwa never had a child before her banishment. Some say the gods gave her that child in the forest." Oma's heart twisted with every word. She knew the truth. That was her daughter, Jiwendu, the girl she had abandoned by the riverbank in the forest. She lost her peace immediately. By the 5th day in Umu Oma, Oma could no longer contain the storm inside her. Her nights were sleepless, and during the day she drifted like a shadow around the compound, her eyes searching, her heart trembling. That evening, after dinner, she asked to speak with her uncle and her husband. Standing before the 2 most important men in her life, Oma confessed everything she had been hiding for years, about the riverbank, about the guilt, about the coral bead, and the girl she had seen at the stream. Michael's eyes widened, and Okonkwo covered his mouth, shaking his head slowly. "You mean that girl is—" Okonkwo couldn't finish the sentence. "I am sure," Oma whispered. "I tied that bead to her myself." Michael was dumbfounded. He took a step back, his face darkening. "You? You mean that child was mine? That you gave birth to my daughter and left her in a forest?" Alma's voice cracked. "Michael, I was young. I was scared. I had no home, no support. I didn't think I could raise her alone." "You didn't even tell me when I returned to marry you. How could you? Oma!" he snapped, pain thick in his voice. "My daughter grew up in a forest, Oma. She didn't deserve that. None of this should have happened." Okonkwo spoke up, his voice strained with emotion. "It is my fault too. I threw you out when you needed me most. I failed you as your uncle. I thought I was preserving the family's name. I didn't know—" The three of them stood in thick, suffocating silence, grief and guilt clinging to the air around them. Michael finally spoke, voice low. "We need to see Ujenwa. We need to hear her side and see our daughter properly." Omar nodded slowly. Yes, it's time. And so, they prepared to visit the woman who had become a mother in Omar's place. Very early the next day, the three of them made their way to Ujinwa's hut. Ujinwa looked up as they approached, her expression calm but guarded. She stood from where she'd been grinding herbs. They exchanged pleasantries, and Ujinwa offered them wooden stools to sit on. Okonkwo broke the silence after they all sat down. He narrated everything Omar had told them, laying emphasis on the bead round Ifunanya's neck. Ujinwa listened quietly. When Okonkwo was done talking, she spoke with a calm voice. "You are right. I found her by the riverbank. I didn't know who she belonged to. All I knew was that the gods led me to her. She was crying, helpless. I took her, raised her, loved her. Till this day, she doesn't know the story. I deliberately left the bead on her neck because I knew a day like this would come." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "You saved her. You gave her life. And we owe you more than we can ever say." A tear escaped Umar's eye. "Can we see her, please?" Ujinwa stood and nodded. "She's fetching water at the stream. She'll return soon." They waited in silence. About 15 minutes later, Ifunanya returned. She paused at the sight of the visitors. She dropped her water pot, greeted them respectfully, and turned towards Ujinwa. "Mama, who are they?" she asked gently. Ujinwa stepped forward slowly and held her daughter's hand. "My child, these people, they are your biological parents." Ifunanya's forehead creased. "Biological? The woman who gave birth to you, the man who gave you life." "They are the ones who brought you into this world," Ujinwa responded, trying to choose her words carefully. Ifunanya stared blankly. "But you told me I was your daughter." "You are," Ujinwa said, her voice breaking, "in every way that matters, but I did not carry you in my womb. I found you 8 years ago by the river, wrapped in cloth, crying, alone. I was banished from this village. I lived in the forest. That morning I heard you cry. The gods led me there. I picked you up." Omar crawled closer on her knees. "Forgive me, Chiwendu. That was the name I gave you," she pleaded. "I was so scared. I was thrown out. I had no food, no shelter. I thought someone else could give you what I couldn't. But I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." Ifunanya turned to her, pain flashing across her young face. "If you loved me, why then did you leave me alone in a forest?" Ona clutched her chest, sobbing. "Because I was broken. I was a teenager. I had nowhere to go. I thought leaving you where someone might find you was better than watching you die slowly with me." Michael stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "And I didn't know you existed. Your mother never told me she was pregnant. If I had known, I would have searched. I would have fought for you." Ifunia cried now, slow tears sliding down her cheeks, her small body shaking. "All these years, I thought I knew who I was, and now, I don't know anymore." Okonkwo also apologized, taking all the blames for sending Umar away. Ifunyanya nodded slowly. Then, turning to Umar and Michael, she said through sobs, "I forgive you. But I won't leave my mama here. She is my mother. She's the only one I know." Omar wept openly. Michael looked away, wiping his tears. Okonkwo placed a hand on Omar's shoulder. "Ifunanya," Michael said quietly, "can we still see you, be part of your life?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know, maybe. But not now." They all left Ujinwa's hut, broken. The next day, Oma and her family returned to Lagos. When they arrived home, Michael dropped the car keys on the table and walked straight into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. He did not call out to Oma. He did not speak to her for the rest of the night. Oma sat on the living room floor, her back against the couch, holding Chibukum to her chest. Her eyes stared at nothing, her thoughts scattered across time. She had found her daughter, but lost her all over again. The days that followed were a blur. Michael left early and returned late. He no longer stayed in the kitchen or teased her while she cooked. He no longer asked if she had eaten or if she was tired. The man who once laughed freely beside her now walked past her like a stranger. Emma tried to start conversations, but his replies were cold and short. "I'm fine. I'm busy. Good night." The silence between them grew louder with every passing day. One night she walked into the bedroom and found him standing by the window, staring into the dark. "Michael," she whispered, "please talk to me." He turned slowly, his eyes bloodshot. "Talk to you?" His voice was low but sharp. "About what, Oma? About how you robbed me of my daughter's childhood? About how you left her in the forest like an abandoned pet?" Oma flinched. "I've said I'm sorry." "Sorry?" He laughed bitterly. "Do you think sorry will undo 8 years of absence? Do you know how it felt, standing there seeing my own child flinch at the sound of my voice? A daughter who doesn't even know I exist?" Oma broke down in tears. "I was young, Michael. I had nothing. I thought she would die if I kept her. I thought I would die. I didn't know what else to do." Michael shook his head slowly. "You should have told me. You should have told someone. You didn't even give me a choice." He walked past her and left the room. That night, she sat by the window, staring at the moon with silent tears rolling down her cheeks. The guilt was heavier now than ever. Weeks passed. Oma stopped trying to speak. Michael stopped trying to listen. Their home had become a shell. She would sometimes sit with Chibuakem and whisper, "You have a sister. Her name is Chiwendu, now known as Ifunanya. I hope one day you'll meet her again." 6 months after they returned to the city, Michael forgave his wife, and he suggested another visit to the village. Chibukem was almost 3 years. When they got to Umu Oma, they went straight to Okonkwo's compound, and very early the next day they visited Ujunwa's hut again. Ifunanya was outside, arranging herbs in baskets. When she looked up and saw them, she stood still for a moment, then smiled. "Good afternoon," she greeted politely, walking toward them. Michael's eyes welled up with tears, and Oma's throat tightened. But they didn't rush her. They were offered seats, and Ujunwa allowed them to speak with Ifunanya, alone. They spoke for a while. Ifunanya spoke kindly to them. Then Michael brought up the idea of her visiting Lagos to spend some time with them, but Ifunanya gently refused. "I want to stay here," she said. "This is my home. Mama Ujunwa raised me. She's my mother." Bazaar's eyes filled with tears. "We understand. We really do." Michael nodded. "But know that we're still your parents too. We'll always love you, Ifunanya, and we'll always support you." From that day forward, Oma and Michael began sending monthly support, enough to give Ujunwa and Ifunanya a life of comfort. They paid for her schooling, bought her books and clothes, and visited often. Ifunanya grew into a graceful young woman, wise, grounded, and deeply loved by 2 families. She became known in the village for her intelligence, her herbal skills, and her quiet confidence. Whenever people asked her who her mother was, she would smile softly and say, "I have 2. One gave me life, the other gave me love." And that was the truth. In the end, the forest had taken nothing from her. It had only prepared her to be the bridge between sorrow and healing. The girl once abandoned at a river had become the daughter of 2 hearts. And that, to Ifunanya, was more than enough. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Kindly like, share, and leave a comment. I will be back with another amazing story. Bye for now.